A rusted ancient human warplane pulsed with unnatural energy on an alien world, as I, a veteran Galactic Council commander, stared at it in disbelief. This warplane could shift the balance of power and save humanity from Vorkarian invasion, if its secrets didn't kill me first. Vorkarian warships grew bolder by the day, testing the resolve of Council defenders like myself. The ruthless alien empire targeted weak frontier colonies, enslaving populations and stripping worlds of resources. Millions had died. Billions more would perish if Vorkarian expansion continued unchecked. The Council was losing ground in this Cold War. Humanity needed a miracle. My patrol in the remote Vorkarian sector was routine until sensors pinged an anomalous reading from a barren world. My second-in-command, Sagan, an arrogant Vorkarian, warned against investigating. "Ignore it," Sagan said. "This planet is well within the demarcation line. Your human curiosity will provoke a diplomatic incident." I trusted my instincts. "I'm going to check it out. I'll deal with any incident myself." "Typical entitled human, believing your authority is unlimited," Sagan muttered. But as my commanding officer, he had to obey. We descended through roiling ion storms to the surface. The energy signature spiked as I stepped onto grey dust and beheld a World War II-era fighter plane, rusted but intact, glowing with unnatural light. Questions flooded my mind. How did this human warplane cross light years to this uncharted world? What alien technology restored it? And why? I had to uncover this mystery. The ancient warplane hummed with power that could turn the tide against the Vorkarians. But something wasn't right. My every instinct screamed danger. Unlocking this plane's secrets might secure humanity's future, or unleash an even greater threat. The lives of billions, maybe trillions, hung on my next move. Arthur's heart pounded as he stepped closer to the ancient warplane, scanner outstretched. The device chimed and beeped erratically, energy readings spiking higher with each step. Whatever powered this impossible machine was housed in the reactor core. Sagan hung back, his scaled hands twitching near his sidearm. The Vorkarian clearly wanted nothing to do with the aircraft. Strange symbols were etched into the hull, angular script that Arthur couldn't pass. His translator visor glitched and fuzzed, unable to find parallels in any known language. Questions burned in Arthur's mind. He had to know more. "I'm going in," Arthur declared, striding up to the rusted fuselage. "You can stay out here if you want." "You have no idea what's in there," Sagan protested. "It could be a trap." Arthur waved him off. "Then stay out here and keep watch. I'll be fine." Sagan grumbled but didn't argue further. Arthur clambered up into the open cockpit, dropping into the pilot's seat. Dust swirled, catching in his throat. He coughed and blinked grit from his eyes. As his vision cleared, he found himself surrounded by technology he'd never seen before. Holographic displays flickered to life, bathing Arthur in an ethereal blue glow. A strange helmet rested on the control panel, trailing wires into the console. Arthur reached out with tentative fingers, brushing the side of the headpiece. It thrummed beneath his touch, seeming to beckon him. Driven by curiosity, Arthur lifted the helmet and nestled it over his head. Pins and needles raced across his skin as the neural interface synced with his mind. His senses expanded, awareness merging with the warplane's sensor suite. Data flooded his consciousness, the hum of the antimatter reactor, the planet's atmospheric composition, gravimetric anomalies in orbit. It was too much, too fast. Arthur screwed his eyes shut, overwhelmed. "To any who find this recording, listen well," the pilot said, his voice rough with age and sorrow. "The Vorkarians will never stop. They will never show mercy. Earth burned because we were weak. Humanity scattered among the stars, but we will not run forever." The hologram shifted, replaced by scenes of carnage and destruction. Vorkarian warships tore through human defense fleets, raining fire on helpless colonies. Cities shattered, continents burned, corpses clogged the streets. Arthur watched in silent horror as the images played out. "We built the Redeemer as our last hope," the pilot continued. a fleet of advanced warplanes to turn the tide. We drove the Vorkarians back and bought ourselves a reprieve. But they will return. The recording ended and the cockpit fell dark. Arthur sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling. If the pilot spoke true, then this aircraft represented humanity's salvation, or its annihilation. The burden of that knowledge settled heavy on Arthur's shoulders. He popped the cockpit canopy and clambered out, legs shaky. Sagan stood where Arthur had left him, his posture stiff and alert. The Vorkarian's eyes narrowed as Arthur approached. "What did you find?" Sagan demanded. "What is this thing?" Arthur met his gaze, jaw set with determination. "Our only chance, we have to get it working again. The future of humanity depends on it." Arthur and Sagan's eyes were wide with shock as they processed the revelations from the holographic message. The weight of the knowledge that this ancient warplane could turn the tide against the Vorkarians hung heavy in the air. They glanced at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. They had to act fast. Arthur's fingers flew over the console, transferring the critical data to a portable drive. Sagan stood guard, his hand resting on his sidearm, eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. The download complete, Arthur yanked the drive free and nodded to Sagan. They clambered out of the cockpit, ready to make their way back to the ship and report their findings to the Galactic Council. But as their boots hit the dusty ground, they found themselves staring down the barrels of a dozen Vorkarian pulse rifles. A heavily armed patrol had surrounded the warplane, their weapons trained on Arthur and Sagan. A tall, imposing Vorkarian stepped forward, his uniform bristling with rank insignia. Arthur recognized him instantly, Commander Zyvex, Sagan's superior and a notorious hardliner. Zyvex's reptilian eyes narrowed as he appraised the two men. "Commander Arthur," Zyvex hissed, his forked tongue flicking out, "you are in possession of Vorkarian state secrets. Surrender the data and the warplane immediately." Arthur stood his ground, meeting Zyvex's gaze unflinchingly. "This technology belongs to humanity, not the Vorkarian Empire. The Galactic Council must be informed of your true intentions." Zyvex's scaled lips peeled back in a sneer. "You have no authority here, human. This planet is well within our borders. Hand over the data or face the consequences." Sagan shifted uneasily beside Arthur, caught between his duty to his superior and his loyalty to his friend. Arthur's hand drifted towards his own sidearm, tension crackling in the air. The Vorkarian soldiers opened fire, a hail of plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Arthur and Sagan dove for cover behind the warplane's landing gear, returning fire with their own weapons. The stench of ozone and burnt metal filled the air as the two sides traded shots. Arthur knew they were outgunned and outnumbered. They couldn't hope to win this fight. He turned to Sagan, shouting over the din of battle. "We have to get out of here, back to the ship." Sagan nodded grimly, laying down covering fire as Arthur made a break for the cockpit. Plasma bolts scorched the ground at his heels as he scrambled up the fuselage, diving into the pilot's seat. His hands flew over the controls, desperately trying to bring the ancient systems online. The warplane shuddered as Vorkarian fire impacted its hull, the advanced shielding struggling to repel the onslaught. Warning lights flashed, and alarms blared as Arthur fought to coax the aircraft into the air. Sagan clambered into the rear gunner's seat, raking the Vorkarian lines with retaliatory fire. With a deafening roar, the warplane's engines flared to life, anti-gravity generators lifting it off the ground. Arthur yanked back on the stick, sending the craft hurtling into the sky, plasma bolts sizzling past the canopy. Vorkarian ships swooped in to give chase, their weapons spitting fire. Arthur gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging through his veins as he pushed the warplane to its limits. He jinked and weaved, drawing upon every ounce of his piloting skill to evade the pursuing ships. The warplane shuddered as enemy fire impacted its shields, alarms screaming in warning. Sagan manned the rear guns, his face set in a mask of concentration as he returned fire, trying to keep the Vorkarians at bay. The chase continued, a deadly dance through the planet's atmosphere, neither side giving quarter. Arthur's fingers danced over the controls. plotting a hyperspace jump even as he dodged and weaved. The stars stretched and blurred as the warplane leaped forward, the stolen data and the ancient craft now safely in their possession. As the ancient warplane hurtled through hyperspace, Arthur and Sagan huddled over the console, their eyes scanning the stolen data scrolling across the screens. The revelations contained within the files hit them like a plasma bolt to the gut. For centuries, the Vorkarians had been systematically hunting down and eradicating any trace of advanced human technology, determined to keep humanity subjugated and powerless. "Those scaly bastards," Arthur growled, his fists clenching. "They've been playing us all for fools." Sagan nodded grimly, his own anger simmering beneath the surface. "And the Council had no idea. We've been blind to their true intentions all this time." But amidst the damning evidence of Vorkarian treachery, a glimmer of hope emerged. Coordinates to a hidden human base, nestled deep within an uncharted nebula, where the last of humanity's warplanes and their pilots lay in cryostasis, waiting for the call to arms. Arthur's heart raced as he punched in the coordinates, the warplane's engines thrumming with renewed purpose. "We have to find that base, Sagan. If we can wake up those pilots and get those ships flying again, we might just stand a chance against the Vorkarians." Sagan's eyes gleamed with a fierce determination. "Then let's not waste any more time. Humanity's future depends on us." As the warplane streaked towards the nebula, its occupants unaware of the danger that lurked in their wake. Light years away, Commander Zyvex paced the bridge of his flagship, his talons gouging furrows into the metal deck plates. The theft of the ancient warplane and the data it contained was a blow to Vorkarian supremacy that could not be tolerated. "I want that human filth found and eliminated," Zyvex snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Mobilize every ship in the sector, scour every system, every asteroid belt, every nebula. I don't care how long it takes or how many resources we have to expend. Arthur and that traitorous Sagan must be brought to heel." The Vorkarian fleet surged forward, a vast armada of sleek, deadly ships, bristling with the most advanced weaponry the Empire had to offer. Their orders were clear: find the rogue Galactic Council commander and the stolen warplane and destroy them both. As Arthur and Sagan approached the coordinates of the hidden base, the nebula looming before them like a swirling, multicolored veil, their sensors screamed a sudden warning. A Vorkarian strike force, dozens of ships strong, emerged from the stellar clouds, their weapons already locked onto the ancient warplane. "It's a trap," Sagan yelled, his hands flying over the weapons console. "They must have anticipated our moves." Arthur gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging through his veins, as he wrenched the warplane into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding the first salvo of enemy fire. The Vorkarian ships pursued, their more modern vessels quickly closing the gap. The warplane shuddered as a plasma bolt grazed its shields, alarms blaring in the cockpit. Arthur's fingers danced across the controls, bringing the ancient ship's weapon systems online. The advanced laser cannons and antimatter torpedoes, centuries ahead of anything the Vorkarians possessed, hummed with deadly potential. "Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine," Arthur growled, lining up a shot on the nearest enemy cruiser. The warplane's lasers lanced out, piercing the Vorkarian shields and carving deep gashes into the ship's hull. The cruiser listed, venting atmosphere and debris before succumbing to a series of secondary explosions. But the Vorkarians kept coming, their superior numbers slowly overwhelming the ancient warplane's defenses. Arthur and Sagan fought with everything they had, the ship's weapons and shields pushed to their limits as they danced and weaved through the enemy formation, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Yet even as they fought, Arthur knew that time was running out. The warplane's shields were failing, its hull battered and scorched by the relentless Vorkarian assault. They had to find the hidden base and awaken the slumbering human warriors, or all would be lost. With a final, desperate push, Arthur plunged the warplane into the heart of the nebula, the Vorkarian fleet hot on their heels. The swirling gases and ionized particles played havoc with sensors and communications, but Arthur flew on instinct, guided by the faint beacon of the hidden base. Suddenly, Through the multicolored murk, a shape loomed before them. A massive ancient space station, its hull pitted and scarred by the ravages of time. Arthur's heart leaped as he realized they had found it, the last bastion of human resistance, the key to their salvation. But as they approached the station, the Vorkarian fleet emerged from the nebula behind them, weapons charged and ready to fire. Arthur and Sagan exchanged a grim look, knowing that the fight was far from over. They would have to give everything they had, and more, to protect the station and the precious cargo it contained. The ancient warplane screamed towards the station, its engines pushed beyond their limits, as the Vorkarian ships opened fire, filling the void with a storm of plasma and laser fire. The battle for humanity's future had begun, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Arthur wrenched the control yoke, sending the ancient warplane careening into the heart of the nebula. Tendrils of ionized gas lashed against the hull, the ship bucking and shuddering as it plunged deeper into the maelstrom. The Vorkarian fleet, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, hesitated at the edge of the storm, their sensors blinded by the electromagnetic interference. "They're not following us," Sagan reported, his eyes glued to the rear scanners. "The nebula's playing havoc with their systems." As if in response to his words, a shrill ping echoed through the cockpit. Arthur's gaze snapped to the sensor display, where a faint signal pulsed amidst the chaos of the nebula. "There! A beacon, coming from that asteroid field." Sagan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Could be a trap. The Vorkarians might be trying to lure us out." "We don't have a choice," Arthur said grimly. "It's our only lead. We have to investigate." With deft movements, Arthur guided the warplane through the swirling gases, the ship's advanced sensors locking onto the signal's source. As they approached the asteroid field, the signal grew stronger, guiding them towards a massive pock-marked rock that dwarfed the others around it. "There," Sagan pointed, his voice tight with tension. "An opening on the asteroid's surface." Arthur's eyes narrowed as he spotted the hangar bay, its entrance shimmering with the telltale distortion of an energy field. He brought the warplane in closer, the ship's scanners probing the barrier, searching for a way through. "It's a human energy shield," Arthur said, surprise coloring his tone. "The locking mechanism is encrypted, but the warplane systems are already working on cracking the code." Seconds ticked by, the only sound the hum of the ship's engines and the muted roar of the nebula outside. Then, with a sudden flicker, the energy field vanished, the hangar bay's massive doors grinding open. Arthur exchanged a glance with Sagan, a mixture of hope and trepidation etched on their faces. With a deep breath, he guided the warplane through the opening, the ship's landing gear touching down on the hangar's deck with a gentle thud. As the engines powered down, Arthur and Sagan unstrapped themselves from their seats, their eyes wide as they took in the sight before them. Row upon row of sleek, deadly warplanes, each one identical to the ancient craft they had discovered, stretched out before them. The ship's hulls gleamed beneath the hangar's lights, their surfaces unmarred by the ravages of time. Arthur nodded, his heart racing as he stepped out of the warplane, his boots ringing against the metal deck. In the center of the hangar, a towering structure caught his eye, its surface etched with the symbols of the ancient human civilization. As they approached the structure, a sudden flicker of light drew their attention. A holographic figure materialized before them, the translucent image of a human male clad in a commander's uniform. The figure's face was lined with age and sorrow, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination. "To those who have found this sanctuary," the commander's voice rang out, "know that you stand in the last bastion of human resistance. Within this facility lie our greatest warriors, the last of our kind to stand against the Vorkarian threat." Arthur and Sagan listened in rapt attention as the commander recounted the fall of human civilization, the desperate gambit to preserve their technology and their people. The hologram's gaze seemed to pierce through them, as if judging their worthiness. "You who have come this far," the commander said, his voice growing urgent, "the task falls to you now. Awaken our slumbering warriors, take up the mantle of humanity's defense, Lead us in the final stand against the Vorkarians and reclaim our rightful place among the stars." As the hologram flickered and faded, Arthur felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. He turned to Sagan, his jaw set with determination. "Let's get to work," he said, striding towards the cryogenic facility. "We have a war to win." Arthur and Sagan raced through the cavernous hangar, their boots pounding against the metal deck plates as they approached the cryogenic facility. With trembling fingers, Arthur punched in the awakening protocol, his heart hammering in his chest as the ancient machinery whirred to life. A hiss of escaping gas filled the air as the first freezing chamber cracked open, revealing the pilot within. The man's eyes snapped open, blazing with the fire of a warrior ready for battle. He stepped out of the chamber, his movements fluid and precise, despite centuries of slumber. "Commander Rain reporting for duty," the pilot said, his voice strong and clear. Arthur quickly briefed Rain on the hidden base's capabilities and the fleet of advanced warplanes at their disposal. The commander wasted no time, joining Arthur and Sagan in awakening the remaining pilots, each one emerging from their frozen slumber with the same fierce determination etched on their faces. As the pilots donned their flight suits and familiarized themselves with the warplane's controls, Arthur brought them up to speed on the current state of the galaxy and the looming Vorkarian threat. The men and women listened intently, their jaws set and eyes hard as they absorbed the gravity of the situation. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the hangar, red lights flashing in warning. Arthur's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he saw the readouts on the nearby screens. "Zyvex's fleet has breached the nebula's perimeter," he said, his voice tight with tension. "They've tracked the energy signature of the ancient warplane. They're coming." Commander Rain nodded grimly, his hand already on the throttle of his warplane. "Then let's give them a welcome they won't soon forget." The pilots streamed into their ships, the cockpit sealing with a hiss as they brought the advanced systems online. Arthur and Sagan joined them, strapping into their own warplanes as the hangar bay doors groaned open, revealing the swirling maelstrom of the nebula beyond. With a roar of engines, the human fleet tore out of the hangar, streaking into the heart of the nebula. The Vorkarian ships, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the human warplanes, scrambled to respond, their formations scattering as they tried to bring their weapons to bear. But the human pilots were too fast, too skilled. They wove through the enemy fleet with dazzling displays of tactical prowess, their antimatter cannons and impenetrable shielding, making short work of the Vorkarian ships. Explosions lit up the void as the alien vessels crumpled and shattered, their hulls splintering under the relentless onslaught of human firepower. Arthur felt a savage grin tug at his lips as he watched his fellow humans tear through the Vorkarian fleet. The tide of battle had turned in their favor, the once mighty alien armada reduced to a floundering mess of burning wreckage and fleeing ships. But even as the last of the Vorkarian vessels winked out of existence, consumed by the fires of their own destruction, a new threat emerged from the depths of the nebula. A gargantuan dreadnought, its hull bristling with weapons and armor, lumbered into view, dwarfing the human warplanes with its sheer size. Arthur's blood ran cold as he saw the telltale glow of the dreadnought's superweapon, a planet-shattering monstrosity capable of obliterating the hidden base and the entire nebula in a single shot. The weapon's barrel began to rotate, an ominous hum building as it prepared to fire. "All ships, focus fire on that dreadnought." Commander Rain's voice crackled over the comm, urgent and commanding. "We can't let that weapon charge up." The human fleet swarmed the dreadnought, pummeling its shields with everything they had, but the behemoth's defenses held fast, shrugging off the attacks like raindrops against a steel hull. Arthur gritted his teeth, his mind racing as he tried to find a weakness in the dreadnought's armor. The superweapon's hum grew louder, the glow intensifying as it neared full power. They were running out of time. Arthur's mind raced as he scanned the dreadnought's hull, searching for any weakness they could exploit. The superweapon's hum reached a crescendo, the glow of its charging barrel blinding in its intensity. They had mere seconds before it fired, annihilating everything in its path. "Commander Rain, take your team and target the weapon's power couplings." Arthur barked into the comm. "I'll draw their fire and buy you some time." Without waiting for a response, Arthur wrenched his control yoke, sending his warplane into a dizzying spiral towards the dreadnought. Plasma bolts sizzled past his canopy as the Vorkarian point defense turrets tracked his erratic movements. Arthur juked and weaved, pushing his aircraft to its limits as he closed in on the dreadnought's hull. His finger tightened on the trigger, sending a volley of antimatter rounds screaming towards the superweapon's armored plating. The rounds impacted with blinding flashes, but the dreadnought's shields held fast, absorbing the brunt of the damage. In his peripheral vision, Arthur saw Commander Rain's strike team making their approach, their ships darting and twisting through the chaos of the ongoing battle. They were closing in on the power couplings, their weapons primed and ready. Suddenly, a squadron of Vorkarian fighters emerged from behind the dreadnought, their hulls sleek and menacing. These were no ordinary fighters. Each one was piloted by a genetically enhanced Vorkarian super-soldier, their reflexes and combat skills far beyond those of a normal pilot. The Vorkarian elites fell upon Arthur's team like a pack of hungry wolves, their plasma cannons spitting fire. Arthur's wingman exploded in a ball of flame, his scream cut short as his ship disintegrated. Arthur gritted his teeth, yanking his ship into a sharp climb to avoid a barrage of incoming fire. The Vorkarian fighters stayed tight on his tail, their shots grazing his shields and sending sparks cascading across his hull. He pushed his thrusters to the max, the G-forces crushing him back into his seat as he attempted to outmaneuver his pursuers. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his muscles straining against the incredible forces exerted upon his body. In a desperate gambit, Arthur cut his engines and flipped his ship end over end, bringing his guns to bear on the Vorkarian fighters. His finger hammered the trigger, sending a stream of antimatter rounds tearing through the enemy formation. Two of the fighters exploded, their wreckage spinning off into the void. But the remaining Vorkarians were too quick, too skilled. They evaded Arthur's fire with preternatural speed, their ships moving in perfect unison as they closed in for the kill. Suddenly, a familiar ship fell in alongside Arthur, its guns blazing. Sagan had joined the fight, his weapons tearing into the Vorkarian elites with ruthless precision. Together, they drove the super-soldiers back, their combined firepower proving too much for even the genetically enhanced pilots to withstand. But as they turned their attention back to the dreadnought, Arthur's heart sank. The superweapon's charging sequence was nearly complete, its barrel glowing white-hot with barely contained energy. Commander Rain's team was still too far away, their weapons unable to penetrate the dreadnought's shields in time. In that moment, Sagan's ship suddenly veered off course, its guns swiveling to target Arthur's warplane. Arthur's eyes widened in shock as he realized the truth. Sagan had been a sleeper agent all along, a Vorkarian spy embedded within their ranks. "I'm sorry, Arthur," Sagan's voice crackled over the comm, cold and emotionless. "But my loyalty has always been to the Vorkarian Empire. You never stood a chance." Sagan's guns opened fire, tearing through Arthur's shields and ripping into his hull. Alarms blared in the cockpit as critical systems failed, the ship shuddering and bucking beneath the onslaught. With a final wrenching twist, Arthur's warplane exploded, the force of the blast hurling him clear of the wreckage. He tumbled through space, his suit's life support systems screaming in his ears as he fought to stay conscious. Through the haze of pain and confusion, Arthur saw Commander Rain's ship closing in, its tractor beam locking onto his suit and pulling him to safety. As he was dragged into the ship's airlock, Arthur's vision began to fade, the darkness of unconsciousness overtaking him. He awoke to the sound of klaxons and shouted orders, his body strapped to a medical gurney, as medics rushed to stabilize his condition. Commander Rain stood nearby, his face grim as he barked orders into his comm unit. "We're out of time," Rain said, his voice tight with urgency. "The dreadnought's weapon is fully charged. We have to stop it now." Arthur struggled to sit up, his body screaming in protest. "How?" he croaked, his voice raw and hoarse. "Our weapons can't penetrate its shields." Rain's eyes gleamed with a sudden desperate hope. "The scientists have discovered something," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "The ancient warplanes, they were designed to combine into a single immensely powerful ship, a megaship, capable of taking on even the most formidable Vorkarian dreadnoughts." Arthur's eyes widened, his heart pounding in his chest. "Then let's do it," he said, his voice filled with grim determination. "Let's show these Vorkarian bastards what humanity is really capable of." The ancient warplanes lifted off from their berths, their engines roaring to life as they maneuvered into formation. Slowly, ponderously, they began to interlock, their hulls twisting and reconfiguring as they merged into a single, colossal vessel. As the megaship took shape, Arthur felt a surge of hope and determination flood through him. This was it, the final stand, the last hope for humanity. With this ship, they could take the fight to the Vorkarians and put an end to their reign of terror once and for all. The megaship's engines flared to life, its weapons systems humming with power. Arthur took his place at the helm, his hands flying over the controls as he prepared to engage the enemy. On the view screen, Zyvex's dreadnought loomed large, its superweapon glowing with deadly intent. The Vorkarian commander's face appeared on the comm, his eyes narrow and filled with hate. "You think this changes anything, human?" Zyvex sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your pathetic ship is no match for the might of the Vorkarian Empire. Prepare to be annihilated." The megaship surged forward, its weapons locked onto the dreadnought's superweapon. Arthur's finger hovered over the trigger, ready to unleash the full fury of humanity's vengeance upon the Vorkarian war machine. The human megaship's engines roared, the vessel surging forward on a collision course with the Vorkarian dreadnought. On the bridge, Arthur's hands flew over the controls, his eyes locked on the looming form of Zyvex's warship. The dreadnought's guns swiveled, locking onto the approaching megaship. A storm of plasma fire erupted from the Vorkarian vessel, the blasts slamming into the megaship's shields with enough force to rattle Arthur's teeth. But the megaship's defenses held, the advanced shielding absorbing the brunt of the onslaught. Arthur gritted his teeth, his fingers dancing across the controls as he brought the megaship within striking distance of the dreadnought's superweapon. "All forward batteries, fire!" Arthur roared, his voice booming through the megaship's comm system. A volley of antimatter projectiles erupted from the megaship's guns, the deadly payload streaking towards the dreadnought's main power core. The Vorkarian ship's shields flared, struggling to repel the incoming fire, but the megaship's weapons were too powerful, too advanced. The antimatter rounds punched through the dreadnought's defenses, slamming into the power core with devastating force. A chain reaction tore through the Vorkarian vessel, explosions blossoming along its hull as the core went critical. "Press the attack," Arthur commanded, his eyes blazing with determination. "Target the superweapon!" The megaship's guns swiveled, locking onto the dreadnought's primary weapon. Another volley of antimatter rounds lanced out, the projectiles ripping into the superweapon's housing. But before the killing blow could be struck, a new threat emerged. On the dreadnought's bridge, Sagan, having somehow survived the destruction of Arthur's warplane, stood at the superweapon's controls, his face twisted in a mask of hatred and defiance. "Hey, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me," Sagan screamed, his voice crackling over the comm. With a final, desperate act, he wrenched the superweapon's controls, aiming the massive cannon directly at the human megaship. Arthur's eyes widened in horror as he realized the magnitude of Sagan's betrayal. The superweapon's barrel glowed with an ominous light, the air thrumming with the build-up of unimaginable energies. "All power to forward shields," Arthur barked, his heart pounding in his chest. But even as the megaship's defenses strained to their limits, Arthur knew it wouldn't be enough. The superweapon's firepower was too great, its destructive potential unmatched by anything in the human arsenal. In that moment, a flicker of movement caught Arthur's eye. On the dreadnought's hull, a small shuttle had detached from the megaship, its course set for the Vorkarian bridge. "Commander Rain, what are you doing?" Arthur demanded, his voice tight with fear and confusion. "What needs to be done?" Rain replied, his voice steady and calm. I'm going to stop Sagan and disable that weapon, whatever it takes. The shuttle dove towards the dreadnought, weaving through a maelstrom of plasma fire and debris. It slammed into the Vorkarian hull, the impact shaking the massive warship to its core. Inside the dreadnought, Rain and his boarding party fought their way through the twisting corridors, their weapons blazing as they cut down scores of Vorkarian soldiers. The air was thick with the stench of blood and burnt metal, the deck plates slick with gore. But Rain pressed on, his eyes hard and determined. He knew that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, that if he failed, all would be lost. On the bridge, Sagan stood hunched over the superweapons controls, his fingers flying over the console as he prepared to fire. The weapon's barrel glowed brighter, the air crackling with barely contained energies. Suddenly the bridge doors exploded inward, a hail of shrapnel and debris filling the air. Rain strode through the smoke and flames, his weapon leveled at Sagan's chest. "Step away from the controls," Rain growled, his voice low and dangerous. Sagan's eyes narrowed, his lips twisting into a sneer. "You're too late, human. The superweapon is primed and ready. With a single shot I will erase your pathetic megaship from existence." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Rain replied, his finger tightening on the trigger. With a roar of defiance, Sagan launched himself at Rain, his hands outstretched like claws. The two warriors collided in a brutal clash, their bodies slamming against consoles and bulkheads as they grappled for dominance. Rain's weapon skittered across the deck, knocked from his grasp by a vicious blow from Sagan. The Vorkarian pressed his advantage, his talons raking across Rain's face and drawing blood. But Rain was far from finished. With a surge of strength he threw Sagan off him, sending the traitor crashing into the superweapons control panel. Sparks flew and alarms blared as the delicate machinery crumpled under Sagan's weight. Rain lunged for the controls, his fingers flying over the console as he worked to deactivate the superweapon. Sagan staggered to his feet, his eyes blazing with hatred and fury. "You can't stop me, human," Sagan snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "The Vorkarian Empire will prevail, and your pathetic species will be nothing more than a footnote in our glorious history." "Not today," Rain growled, his hand slamming down on the final switch. The superweapon's barrel dimmed, the energies within dissipating harmlessly into the void. Sagan let out a howl of rage and despair, his last desperate gambit thwarted. But even as the superweapon fell silent, the dreadnought shuddered and bucked, the damage from the megaship's assault taking its toll. Explosions ripped through the Vorkarian vessel, the hull splitting apart as the ship began to break up. On the bridge, Rain and Sagan were thrown to the deck, the artificial gravity fluctuating wildly as the dreadnought systems failed. Rain staggered to his feet, his eyes widening in horror as he realized the extent of the damage. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and explosions. But Sagan was beyond reason, his mind consumed by hatred and despair. With a final animalistic roar he lunged at Rain, his talons outstretched. The two warriors collided once more, their bodies slamming against the failing bulkheads as they fought tooth and nail. But this time there would be no mercy, no quarter given. With a final desperate effort, Rain wrapped his hands around Sagan's throat, squeezing with all his strength. The Vorkarian's eyes bulged, his scales turning a sickly shade of purple as the life was choked out of him. And then, with a sickening crunch, Sagan's neck snapped, his body going limp in Rain's grasp. The commander let the corpse fall to the deck, his chest heaving with exertion and adrenaline. But there was no time to rest, no time to savor the victory. The dreadnought was coming apart around them, the hull splitting open and venting atmosphere into the void. Rain staggered back to the waiting shuttle, his boarding party close behind. They launched away from the dying warship, the small craft shaking and rattling as it fought to escape the dreadnought's death throes. On the megaship's bridge, Arthur watched in horror as the Vorkarian vessel began to plummet towards the nearby planet, its engines failing and its hull wreathed in flames. The dreadnought was an unstoppable juggernaut of destruction, its massive bulk threatening to crush entire cities upon impact. Arthur's heart pounded as he watched the dreadnought plummet towards the planet's surface, trailing fire and debris. Cities and villages sprawled below, millions of lives hanging in the balance. There was no time to think, only to act. "All power to engines," Arthur roared, his fingers flying across the megaship's controls. "Intercept course now!" The megaship surged forward, its thrusters flaring as it chased the falling dreadnought. The two massive vessels streaked through the atmosphere, the dreadnought's hull glowing red-hot from the friction of re-entry. On the bridge, Arthur's crew worked frantically to bring the tractor beam online. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they rerouted power from non-essential systems, coaxing every last ounce of energy into the beam emitters. "Tractor beam at maximum power," the chief engineer shouted over the din of straining machinery. Arthur gritted his teeth, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Lock onto the dreadnought. Engage on my mark." "We've got it," the helmsman cried, his face lit by the glow of the tractor beam. "Altering course now." Slowly, the megaship began to turn, dragging the dreadnought with it. The two vessels veered away from the populated areas, streaking towards the planet's vast, uninhabited deserts. But the dreadnought's mass and velocity were too great, the tractor beam straining to its limits. Warning lights flashed across the bridge consoles, alarms blaring as the beam emitters began to overheat. "We're losing it," the engineer yelled, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Tractor beam overloading." Arthur's jaw tightened, his mind racing. If the tractor beam failed, both ships would be destroyed, and the dreadnought would still slam into the planet with devastating force. There was only one option left. "Disengage the beam," Arthur ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Break away now." The megaship wrenched itself free, the tractor beam snapping off with a blinding flash. The dreadnought, freed from the megaship's grasp, plunged towards the desert floor, trailing fire and smoke. Arthur watched, his heart in his throat as the dreadnought slammed into the sands with a cataclysmic impact. A blinding flash lit the horizon, a massive shockwave rippling outward, shaking the megaship even at its safe distance. As the dust began to settle, the bridge crew stared in awe at the dreadnought's wreckage, a twisted heap of metal burning in the desert. It was a testament to the bravery and sacrifice of those who had fought to stop it, a victory snatched from the jaws of certain defeat. In the skies above, the Vorkarian fleet, now leaderless and broken, began to turn tail and flee. Their dreams of conquest lay shattered, their once mighty war machine crumbling before the resurgent human forces. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. The balance of power had shifted, the Vorkarian threat diminished, and humanity's place among the stars secured. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations, a turning point in the long and bitter war between two races. On the megaship's bridge, Arthur sagged back in his chair, exhaustion and relief washing over him. They had done it, against all odds. The road ahead would be long and hard, but for now they could savor this triumph, this glorious victory born of sacrifice, determination, and the indomitable human spirit. The megaship turned, setting a course for home, leaving the burning wreckage of the dreadnought behind. A new chapter in humanity's story had begun, one written in the blood and fire of this fateful day. The human megaship limped back to the hidden base, its hull scarred and battered from the ferocious battle with the Vorkarians. Inside, the surviving pilots sat in silence, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. They had won the day, but at a terrible cost. Friends and comrades had fallen, their sacrifices forever seared into the memories of those who remained. Arthur walked among the weary survivors, offering words of comfort and encouragement. He knew their fight was far from over, that the Vorkarians would not rest until humanity was wiped from the stars. But for now they needed to regroup, to tend to their wounds and honor their dead. As the pilots began to disembark, a sudden commotion drew Arthur's attention. A young ensign rushed up to him, her face pale and urgent. "Commander, We're receiving a distress signal from the Elysium mining colony. They're under attack by Vorkarian forces. Arthur's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. The Vorkarians were relentless, striking at humanity wherever they could. He turned to his crew, his voice ringing out across the hangar bay. Prep the megaship for immediate departure. We're not going to let those colonists face this alone. Within minutes, the human fleet was underway, racing towards the besieged colony. As they approached, the scope of the attack became clear. Vorkarian dropships swarmed the colony's perimeter, disgorging hordes of heavily armed troops. Smoke and flames billowed from shattered buildings, the screams of the dying filling the air. Arthur wasted no time, ordering his pilots to engage the enemy. The human ships dove into the fray, their guns blazing as they tore through the Vorkarian ranks. The ground trembled beneath the onslaught, the air thick with the stench of burnt metal and scorched flesh. Amidst the chaos, Arthur spied a familiar figure leading the Vorkarian charge. Sagan, his once trusted friend, now a bitter enemy. The traitor had survived the destruction of Zyvex's dreadnought and now sought to exact his revenge upon humanity. With a roar of anger, Arthur leapt from his ship, his weapon drawn. He charged towards Sagan, dodging and weaving through the maelstrom of laser fire and exploding shrapnel. The two warriors collided in a brutal clash, their blades sparking as they traded blows. They fought with a savagery born of betrayal and hatred, each seeking to end the other's life. Arthur's vision narrowed, his world reduced to the snarl of Sagan's face and the flash of his blade. In a final desperate lunge, Arthur drove his sword deep into Sagan's chest, the traitor's eyes widening in shock and pain. As he fell to his knees, Sagan's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think this is over, human?" he hissed, blood bubbling from his lips. "You have no idea what you're up against. The Keltak have been pulling the strings all along. They'll never stop until your kind is nothing but ashes and dust." With a final shuddering breath, Sagan died, his revelation ringing in Arthur's ears. The Keltak. A name that struck fear into the hearts of even the most hardened warriors. An ancient race, shrouded in mystery and darkness, said to possess technology and power beyond imagining. As the last of the Vorkarian forces fell, Arthur stood amidst the ruins of the colony, his mind reeling with the implications of Sagan's words. If the Keltak were truly behind the Vorkarians' aggression, then humanity faced a threat unlike any they had ever known. Arthur gazed out at his battered fleet, the weight of responsibility settling heavy upon his shoulders. He knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, that the price of victory might be more than they could bear. But he also knew that they had no choice. The fate of humanity, of the entire galaxy, rested in their hands. They would fight, and they would win, no matter the cost. With a heavy heart, Arthur turned to his crew, his voice steady and resolute. "Prepare the fleet, we have a war to win." The bridge of the megaship hummed with activity as Arthur stared out into the vast expanse of space, the stars cold and distant. In his mind's eye, he could see the battles yet to come, the worlds that would burn, and the lives that would be lost. But he also saw hope, a flicker of light amidst the darkness. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had prevailed. They would do so again, no matter how long it took or how much they had to sacrifice. For in the end, the only thing that mattered was survival, the survival of their species, of their way of life. And Arthur would fight to his last breath to ensure that humanity endured, that they would never be extinguished from the cosmos. His eyes hardened with determination, his grip tightening on the console. The Keltak had started this war, but humanity would finish it, and heaven help any who stood in their way. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.